new podcast from me, Pulse. I am the voice of the Resistance, which sounds like a Babylon 5 reference. Chad Kirshner. And I have Alex Dykes with me today from Alex Buyer's Guide? No, Auto Buyer's Guide.
Auto Buyer's Guide and EV Buyer's Guide. Speaking
Al-
of the Resistance, have you ever heard of the British comedy Allo Allo?
I have not.
You must watch it. It's campy, and they have The Resistance.
The Resistance. I will put a
Yes.
link in the show notes.
So I will
because
just refer to myself as Michel from The Resistance.
Yes. So thanks for coming on, Alex.
You're welcome.
We are I don't know exactly what episode this will be when it drops, but there's a lot of misinformation and just kind of general BS out there on the internet. I don't know if you know that. I don't know if you saw that. And one of the things that kind of came to me as in a brainwave, because I was watching the Apple TV show Masters of the Air. Long story short, I'm like, oh, resistance. That's cool because resistance is represented by the capital letter Omega, and is like electricity. So, woohoo, electricity!
But isn't resistance futile?
Yes, except it wasn't because of some unorthodox strategy from a former first officer that I know.
Yes.
And then he never had any, there was one episode where he dealt with PTSD from that, and then that was it. And this is probably a topic for another podcast, but Starfleet really should have.
You know what? They made him sterner in the future. In the past future, right?
They did, but then they were right when. Then in First Contact, Starfleet was right when they should have not had Picard show up at the battle, because he turns out kind of being an emotional wreck, and he's still an emotional wreck in the TV series Picard as well.
Yeah, but that's because that's current times where we're more touchy feely, right? So
that's right. Yes. There to go. I forgot you are a fan.
You just had to suck it up. You just had to suck it up in the past, right? So
then why'd they put a counselor on the bridge of the Enterprise then? Of course, they didn't know how to use her. That's neither here nor there. I could defend. There's a lot of misinformation out there about Star Trek: The Next Generation as well, such as Marina Sirtis's character was good. I think she's a good actor. I don't think they had any idea how to write her. And when
she got better in the end, she got better after Gene Roddenberry died.
She did, actually. Yes. And I did like her showing up in she showed up a little bit in Voyager as sort of an alternate to Reg Barclay, and we are way off track, but
we are.
I've considered launching a Star Trek podcast, and I want to name it Faith of the Heart.
Oh,
in honor of the theme song of Star Trek Enterprise.
I mean, there is a considerable amount of overlap in EV tech nerds and Trekkies, right? It's like
I believe so. I mean,
it's a Venn diagram,
a Venn diagram.
Yeah,
but
it's
like the idea of
more of a circle, really. But
right. So like the idea of this podcast would be to not only kind of help counter the EV narrative, but feature people in businesses and engineers and stuff like that who are not only out there like combating the narrative, but combating it maybe different ways. So there's some people that directly are like rebuffing the stuff that's out there. There's so many people out there that are focused on education, like what we do with our EV Basics series. Like it's combating the misinformation by providing accurate information. I also want to feature people who are fighting the quote unquote good fight for electrification and alternative energy and transportation and basically where we should end up as a society and not rolling everything back. And I mean, I don't believe cars the answer for everybody anyway. So like, I think that we'll cover, more than just electrified vehicles. But I know that when I pitched you this idea, you were like, "Oh, I want to be catty." So
it is a bright future. Yeah. We just got a Blazer EV recently. So did you know
that it doesn't have Apple CarPlay?
Nancy Pelosi came down personally and arm wrestled us because we were going for a regular Blazer and we ended up at the dealer and Nancy Pelosi was there, buff as hell, and she was just like, "No, throw down." Like muscled us to the floor, made us sign the contracts to get this electric.
Yes,
because that's how it went down. I mean, it was, yeah. It was bad. It's
because
bad. I'm Bruce.
the
I'm all
government.
over. But
I was gonna
also
say you look like
strangely
it.
excited because she's got some real thigh strength. That woman.
Yeah, the government mandating EVs.
Yes. Yes.
What I
All
hear
of them. And that's
last,
the only reason people buy them. It's
yeah,
they
and
were
you
forced.
that's
They were made to buy them.
right, and you can only buy them. Like those are the only things you can buy. You can't go into a dealership today and buy a Jeep
No,
Wrangler with a
no. None of
392 Hemi
those.
in it. Like
No,
that
none of
doesn't
those other
exist. That
things are
just
there.
no longer.
No,
All
no.
right, so
And it took 5
sarcasm.
hours to charge, and it was a hellish trip
Oh,
back
oh
home.
yeah. Because you stopped and the amount of range you added when you ate lunch wasn't enough to be practical. And
No,
gosh, there's
no.
just so
I
much. There's
mean,
so much bad stuff
I mean,
out there.
I mean, yes, because I got a
Yes.
Blazer EV, but that's wholly different.
Well, so I mean, the Blazer EV is part of GM's sort of Ultium push.
Mm-hmm.
Though just today, as we're recording this, GM's kind of pulling back maybe a little bit from what they said. Hold the brakes. But then there's other companies out there that are still full steam ahead. I mean, I'm not referring to just Tesla, but
Yeah.
so like, where are we? Like what? I mean, like where are we in terms of EVs as you see it? Like where's the market? Where's the market going to go over the next, let's say, 12
Ooh,
months?
crystal ball time.
Yeah, maybe.
I did not pack my crystal ball. I would say that we are at an interesting point because we're at a point where we've seen the market largely being driven by the success of Tesla. And there is I can't define who bought a Tesla because they wanted an EV or who bought a Tesla because they wanted a Tesla. But there are both of these groups, right, that are buying Tesla. And we are now
Yes.
seeing a growth of EV interest outside of Tesla for dozens of reasons, right? I mean, obviously, there's Tesla's political direction, there's Elon, there's the fact that some of them are just a little bit boring, or maybe they're boring because there's just so many of them. I think the Model 3 looks really pretty, but you also see a
Yes.
bazillion of them in Northern California, right? So they're everywhere. And if you want to be a
Right.
little bit different, maybe you're willing to look at something else. So I think we're starting to see that shift there of other EV entrants coming on the line. And I think we're seeing some of the teething troubles in that process, but we're also seeing, and I think the Blazer is a good example of this, which is kind of why we bought it, to see what this is like from a mainline manufacturer. The thing that I find interesting about GM's electrification plan, for better or worse, I mean, there's obviously pros and cons. Lack of CarPlay is a
Sure.
bad con.
No, I
But
understand.
it's that GM is like, we're going to have a Blazer and we're going to have a Blazer EV and an Equinox EV, and a Silverado EV, and all of these things, right? But instead of making electric versions of the same thing, like BMW's i5 versus the 5 Series, Chevy's like, nope, we're all in on the electric thing. We're making a dedicated electric platform and a ton of variations of them, and still sticking on, and we'll just see where this goes. And then in the process, maybe not by design, but where we are now is that we see pricing parity in the GM lineup between these. So Blazer EV and Blazer, they're about the same price to buy because there's so much cash on the hood of the Blazer EV. They
Right.
lease about the same. And oddly enough, according to USAA, because we were looking at this, USAA is our personal insurance company, it was only $5 a year more to insure the Blazer EV versus the regular Blazer. So
Well,
almost
that's
all of
interesting
the
because
general concerns are really not valid when you're talking about some of these alternatives out there.
well, I'm told how much insurance is. Like, you can't buy an
Yeah.
EV because insurance is a gajillion dollars a
Yeah.
week.
Yeah, and let's
And
unpack that, because what I find interesting about that is that the examples always given are, there's, here's this news article. And you're like, well, okay, yeah, a Model Y or a Model 3 are going to cost more than a Toyota Camry to insure. The car costs $20,000 more. Of course it's going to be more expensive. And I will say that
well,
design-wise, Tesla's decision-making process around large single-piece castings, things like that, that has a big impact on insurance costs, which is why we have
it
seen
does.
other car companies not be so excited about this. And so you
Well,
have to
and when
decide,
you
what do you want?
yeah, and when you look at average prices for insurance. Let's say if you just look at an EV average, of course that's going to be skewed heavy towards Tesla because Tesla is still such a large part of the market. And that's just
and luxury, and skews heavily luxury too, I think is the important thing for customers to understand.
But Tesla has a very difficult time getting parts and stuff like that. Replacement parts take a while. As you mentioned, the single castings type
do
stuff.
You have an answer for the parts problem? Like, why is that?
Because nobody running Tesla. Nobody running Tesla knows what they're doing.
Yeah, like, that's the only thing I can assume, is that it's just they're bad at business on that front. Like, parts supply chain.
I have been a firm believer that if Elon sort of pre-Model 3 would have hired a COO for Tesla that understood auto manufacturing, we would be in a much different place today regarding, because there's some things that, yes, you could argue that making cars for 120 years now, like that can create some inertia and an inability to change, but it also gave you 120 years to optimize production, and with the emphasis on reducing costs and Kaizen and just in time and all of the marketing terms that I don't want to remember from my MBA program, is
Mazda's favorite is Jinba Itai.
Yes,
the horse and the rider.
Yes, the horse and the rider. This is an audio first podcast, but if you are watching the videos,
so they're hand motions that you need to watch.
Yeah, there's this will be on YouTube too. But
so but if they're listening, then they need to listen, and then when they're done listening, they need to go also watch it on the YouTubes, because gotta see the funny faces.
Right, exactly. But Elon was so anxious to disrupt automotive manufacturing because it helped boost the share price, and Tesla's the meme stock of the millennium.
And admittedly,
it worked.
I'm told by others that I am an anti-Elon person, but I will be real clear. I have a lot of problems with some of the things that Elon's done, and I think in some areas he just does not know what he's doing and goes off assuming he does. But also, Tesla wouldn't be where they are without him.
Oh, of course not.
So, that is the one character in this industry that is a difficult card to figure out what to do with, because he may have outlived his time at Tesla. The future will tell us. But we certainly wouldn't be here without him there.
Sure. Yeah. And his personality that is now kind of coming back, I think, to really hurt him, was a very similar personality, which was able to help him grow and convince people to join him. So I think in Elon Musk in 2024, everything I see publicly from him, I disagree with a lot. However, I agree with you saying we wouldn't be where we are today at all talking about electrification if it weren't for Elon and Tesla. And, we are I am Monday morning quarterbacking on what he should have done. But we wouldn't be here. And
it's for better or for worse, because if the rumor mill's to be believed, where there was a group inside Tesla really pushing hard for a more normal truck, I don't think the Cybertruck would be selling as well as it does, because it sells because it's weird looking. Because when you think about it, it doesn't actually do anything better than any of the other trucks. It's not the fastest truck or the fastest charging truck or the biggest truck or the best handling truck or any of these things, right? But it looks weird, and lots of people want a weird looking truck.
Well, and in some ways it's a meme truck from a meme automaker, and I don't necessarily mean that in a negative kind of way. It is just really an attention, like it's I don't know how different a Lamborghini Aventador buyer is from a Tesla Cybertruck buyer in terms of thought, process, maybe income levels and stuff like that, but Freud would probably say that they were similar and both love their mothers, but so Tesla, so we see Tesla's market share kind of diminishing a little bit, but that's to be expected as there's more competitors.
Right. Yeah.
how much are the Koreans buying market share with unsustainable leases and stuff like that? Or are
Hmm.
they making money and it just so happens that they can also offer these cars insanely cheap? Because you can get, yes, you can
Yeah.
get a Nissan Leaf in Colorado for $20 a month, but like you can get an EGMP 235 kilowatt, 10 to 80%, 18-minute, comfortable, full sized EV, like a decent
Hmm.
size for $200 a month with just a
Yeah.
grand or $2,000. Like,
I
is
um I am curious on that one because I will say if we look at some of the nuts and bolts of what Kia and Hyundai are doing, I think their cost structure is intrinsically lower. There's a good exchange rate advantage for them building them in Korea currently. Their partnerships with the battery manufacturers are uniquely Korean. They're Korean batteries, Korean car company. We see a lot of like opaque relationships in some of these Korean companies. We also have the huge advantage for Hyundai and Kia in that even though Hyundai is not all one company anymore, like there's Hyundai this and Hyundai that and Hyundai everything, right? But they are interwoven by family arrangements, co-ownership, stock ownership that's owned here and owned there and owned by this family member and that family member everywhere, that the effect is that it still operates like a chaebol, like a one enormously vertically integrated company. And that I think shields Hyundai, the car Hyundai, from worrying about what loses money and what makes money. And so I think that's part of why we see them spending so much money on Genesis, so much money on electrification, because they have a long distance plan and they're shielded from investors and the larger stock market getting worried about it. You see Genesis or Hyundai doing, we're going to lose $10 billion over however many years on Genesis. And they're still doing it. They're still setting the cash on fire,
right.
throwing it at the door, right? You see GM try that with Denison and Cadillac, and it lasted, what, like 2 years? And then they were like, oh, no, the whole money losing thing,
Yeah.
that's over. So I think
Well,
they
and
have
like,
just a structural advantage.
yeah, they're deeper. They have a deeper bullpen of money, perhaps, to use
Mm-hmm.
a slight baseball reference. In that, like Ford is profitable because Ford Pro, like
Mm-hmm.
commercial, and like trucks
Yep.
obviously make money and things like that. So the big three, big two and a half, big two, however you want to word it, um, make their money on trucks. This isn't that. This is like if
Yeah.
GM owned all of the suppliers and built
Yep.
TVs
Yep.
and
And smelted
just
their own
and
steel.
smelted their own steel and ran their own
Yep.
money. Like if they controlled the entire vertical
Right.
plus
Exactly.
still be leveraged in other
Yep.
areas to help kind of to
Yep.
balance
And
things
your
out. They
employees
can
had lived in GM buildings and you own the mine the ore came out of and you made the
right,
tractors to dig it out of the ground. And yeah, that's that crazy thing with Hyundai.
right. Like I mean, so if you have all of that, you are much more insulated, and
Hmm.
you can quote unquote lose money. So
Yeah.
like when you ask somebody at Hyundai Motor, oh, do you lose money on EVs? Like we're not in the business of selling cars we don't make money on. Well,
Who
they're
knows,
not.
right?
They're not when you look at
Yeah.
the perhaps they're not if you look at the giant conglomerate as a whole.
Hmm.
Even though if you broke it down for the cost per car to
Yeah.
manufacture, maybe they do. Um,
And it's some of it's unclear because obviously lease rates are
yes,
tricky because there are subsidies on leases from the manufacturer. So the manufacturer will basically fund the finance company, which is an arm of the same car company, to reduce the lease cost. The leases do qualify for the $7,500 tax credit, so the leasing company keeps that. So that kind of you know makes that math fiddle out a little bit better. And I will say there's some pretty damn cheap leases out there else because that's why we got the Blazer. We leased this Blazer. It's under $200 a month. 2 years, $6,300 single pay lease. It was so cheap that we put it on a credit card, got 2% cash back, and the dealer paid for the lift from the airport and the $59 Southwest flight uh, to get down there. I mean, this is an insanely cheap lease for a $51,000 car.
I would just like to point out, I did say earlier this is supposed to be an audio kind of first thing. I was just like, wow, like my jaw's like
Yeah.
floor. I
So
need Nancy
cheap.
Pelosi to give me one of those too.
I know.
I would do that deal.
I had to give Nancy $51,000 first, but it worked out in
Oh,
the
okay.
end. It's fine. Yeah.
Yes, it all worked out in the end.
But no,
Yeah,
so
so like,
insanely cheap lease deals. Like that is on the Kia, I am curious. I would assume that Kias and Hyundais would be more profitable than this for the same lease price because they have smaller batteries and they're smaller and lighter vehicles. So there's certain efficiencies in that higher voltage. So the
sure.
wiring gets to be smaller, a lot of it. So I am casually curious if the GM Ultium one, obviously built in the US, so a little bit more expensive there. GM's battery design um, is novel. I am intrigued, but it's wicked
Yep.
heavy and it's got to be
It,
expensive. Got
yeah.
to be
I
expensive.
was
So much hand building in that thing.
I asked a former reporter at Automotive News now, I believe it's CNBC. I won't name drop him, but you can figure out who it is.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, hey, so you used to cover the GMB at Automotive News. Like, I've been told that Ultium is like this ultimate platform. Like, this is
Mm-hmm.
it's going to save the company so much money. They're going to be able to take advantage of these quantities of scale. You're going to
Yeah.
have all of this efficiency. As like, where is it? The
Yeah.
Hummer EV weighs 9,200 pounds. The Silverado EV is just as heavy. I know trucks are going to be heavier to begin with, but
Mm-hmm.
like,
GM's focus has been on wicked. I mean, remember, I would say the core thing with GM and Toyota as well, Honda to some extent also, they tend to be very conservative engineering companies. Like GM is
yeah,
very conservative when it comes to the way they choose to design things. Toyota definitely as well. Toyota's just the Japanese GM, honestly.
yeah,
Um, and GM with Ultium, we should probably also clarify that Ultium is several platforms, oddly enough, joined by a common electrical infrastructure. So, like
okay,
Ultium, the Ultium trucks and the Ultium Blazer, not exactly the same platform. Like they don't share crash structures and things like that.
right.
Blazer, Equinox, Lyric, etc. Those share crash structures. The trucks, they're different and bigger and crazier, right?
Because they
But in
stack the batteries on top of each other in
partially
those.
there too, yeah, because they were
Yeah,
designed for this double stack battery, and that's part of the weird thing is that they went into this going, let's have some massive batteries, and oh my god, is that battery huge? Like 212 kilowatt hours of usable capacity is just bonkers. But obviously, that comes with a massive weight penalty. And then when
yeah,
you drill down deeper, I think that's why Blazer and Equinox are so porky, is because they designed their common platform elements to support these big trucks and big SUVs, 3-row things. It's going to be obviously an
mhm.
electric Escalade. We know there's going to be an electric Tahoe Suburban, et cetera, at some point in the future.
Sure, of course.
There's going to be a slightly smaller 3-row thing too. The whatever we're calling that from Cadillac Vistic or something. We've all
Yeah,
got cues,
yeah,
lots of cues, and
all the
so
cues. So they might be
all the
changing
cues.
that.
Yeah, all the cues. I'm kind of sad because the cues are kind of weird and interesting. But at any rate, so like they designed all these parts for the bigger vehicles and then they made them work in smaller vehicles. And there's certainly some downsides by the time we get down to Blazer and Equinox sized vehicles. If you want to talk about that later, we can. But the
Mhm.
big one is weight, because these modules were designed to be removable. So the supposedly like your module dies, you can go and it can be not only replaced by the dealer, but that module could then be sent back to be refurbished and recycled as needed. So I
Yeah,
applaud them for that level. But then that means that these battery modules have to be individually cooled and individually packaged. And then there's, the cooling connectors are just mind blowing. And then they've got to have all this extra physical structure for these modules to sit in and survive a crash in. And I'm like, just like, oh my God, this adds so much weight.
yes. Yeah, I think that, like, in some ways, I think Ultium, especially looking at it, is like kind of brilliant because these
Yeah.
individual modules could make repair costs much less. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but it also forces the way the battery pack needs to be shaped and
Yeah.
how it works and how you protect the cells. And And I think that maybe on a big truck it doesn't matter so much, as much, but like Equinox is a porker.
Yeah.
And I I guess maybe it ultimately doesn't matter, but like
I'm intrigued to see where the market goes because the sort of bet with Equinox is that batteries are going to be unreliable in a way.
yeah,
That's probably, I'm sure GM would disagree with this, but it seems like the engineering bet is that there's going to be a battery or a cell that goes awry. There's going to be a module that needs to be replaced. So we need to have a method to make this easier and more cost effective in the future. One could argue it's an environmental decision because then it allows your pack to have a longer life because you can replace individual
yeah,
components. But on the other hand, there's so much more efficiency baked into a pack that just is really energy dense, glued together, sealed shut, never meant to be individually surfaced. Just you have a much lighter vehicle, and for the lifetime of the vehicle, that means you're going to consume less energy. So,
right.
pros and
Well,
cons.
I'd like to talk about that sort of battery life longevity thing, and then kind of do a quick round
Hmm.
of like just dispelling myths. But
Oh,
first, I'm going to do a teeny tiny
are
break
we
for
talking about the fact that my Blazer has already lost 300 miles of range since it drove off the lot
yes,
last week?
yes,
Yeah, that's bad.
myths
Very bad.
and facts like
Yeah.
that. Which I'm going to create a spot for an ad break. If you hear an ad break, hey, that's great. If you don't hear an ad break, well, we didn't have any advertisers for this, so there you go. Oh, hey, we're back.
Hey,
Alex is back
did you enjoy that ad for
for
whatever that ad was
whatever
for?
that was, or no ad at all.
I know I
One of the
ran out and bought 3 of them. So,
one of the podcast hosts that we're working with can dynamically insert ads later. So it's possible somebody could download this episode a year from now and it have an ad in it, even if the ad doesn't run today.
yes, I have heard
And you
of
can
this
sell ads based
magic.
of so it's pretty wild. But so your Blazer's already lost 300. It's already lost 500 of its 300 total miles of range.
And
Um,
well, 300 of it's 285.
oh,
So,
okay,
it's
okay,
I have
yeah,
to push it for the first 6 miles to get it to go anywhere. So I can get it to go
sure.
downhill.
And
That's
then
the
that
big
kind of
part.
regen charges it as it
Yeah.
goes down the hill. I
Yeah.
see. No,
Yeah.
I follow.
Yeah.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, we talked about leasing, and we talked about a little bit about how Ultium this repairability should be better than just a massively dense battery sort of
Hmm.
pack. Where once all of these off lease vehicles go to their second owner and maybe their third owner, what's happening with these batteries? Because before we get into
Hmm.
other misconceptions and concerns and questions, I think that there is a legit question about batteries and what happened.
Yeah. I would agree. There's a legitimate question, and the honest answer is we are not as clear on that as a society yet as we would love to be. Right? We don't have as much data as we'd like, but the data that we do have indicates that EV batteries, by and large, don't degrade as rapidly as had initially been expected. There is a pretty predictable linear curve. So or sorry, linear degradation pattern. So it's a pretty
Yeah,
sharp drop the first year, which makes sense
sure.
chemically when you talk about how the battery is put together. You first start to charge it, oxides start to form here and there. There's an immediate drop over the first year, generally of around 5% or so. And then it's about 1% a year after that. So after 10 years, you may be 15%. And it doesn't seem to really be affected by how many times you've DC fast charged. It
Okay.
seems that generally speaking, higher temperatures, especially when charging at higher temperatures or sustained low state of discharge, tend to affect battery performance more. And the intriguing part here is that a lot of the studies that people point to when it comes to really poor battery lifetime are not batteries in EVs. They're more general research on lithium ion batteries and
Right.
their usage. And it's important for consumers to understand that if you're buying an EV, unless you're hacking your software and doing something crazy, you are never fully charging your battery and you are never fully
Right.
discharging your battery, generally speaking, especially with nickel
Yeah.
metal chemistry or NMC, high nickel cobalt lithium ion batteries, I should say. You're never fully charging, never fully discharging, because that's generally bad for the battery's lifetime. So every
Right.
EV out there has some sort of reserved capacities, a few kilowatt hours at the top, few kilowatt hours at the bottom. And because of the way that some car companies do this, you may actually never even notice the first 5 or 6% loss, because the car company can dynamically adjust the portion of the battery
Right.
that you're able to actually use. So a
It's
lot of
like
this is just fear mongering.
it's a lot like an SSD, a solid state
Yeah.
drive, because those have limited read and write cycles. So there are extra, basically, sectors in these components that will, when one fails, another one picks up, and there's error correction and stuff like that. The drive takes care of itself. It sounds like the battery management software is taking care of itself here. And you're right, like an EV battery isn't like your cell phone. Now, my 3-year-old iPhone that I have, which I'm gonna get a new one this fall, is down to, I want to say, either 89 or 90% of its total capacity, which is still great.
Mine?
Like, I mean, it's still
Now,
fine.
what's mine? Now, what's my phone? I must check and see what my battery life is, because I haven't looked recently.
But
Uh,
I mean, I charge mine regularly.
Max
Like,
capacity 100. We're good.
woo. Like, your laptop now, I mean, mine will hold at 80% if it doesn't think it's going to be used. Like, there's all of this extra processing going into preserving battery life.
And if you follow those rules of charging your EV battery to a stated 80 or 90%, depending on the manufacturer, you should realistically see very little loss over time.
Yeah, and I mean, level 2 charge, DC fast charge doesn't make a huge difference. Especially if you're not going past, let's say, that 90, or going less than 10. Like, if you lived your entire life between 10 and 80, between 10 and 90, I doubt you'd probably notice.
Yeah. And the average American is probably not even going to go as low as 10.
Oh no, it scares Craig to go
Yeah.
below 10. We do these charging challenges videos where we do a charge curve analysis, and I'm like, you need to get less than 5, and he'll be like, oh, I'm gonna get less than 10. I'm like, please go lower.
Yep.
Because I want to be able to get that early kind of ramp up. But I mean, how many people don't go less than a quarter of a tank of gas in there?
Right. Not many people, to be honest. And that's the other thing when we're talking about cycle lifetime for a lithium ion battery. If the battery is rated for 3,000 cycles, that doesn't mean 3,000 cycles from 80% to 70% back to 80%.
Yeah.
That's not a right.
Explain to our audience what a cycle would be in this case.
A cycle would be maximum charge to maximum discharge. That is considered one cycle. And so fractional cycles add up over time, but that's not a cycle for the lifetime of the battery. So for instance, like, I live off grid. So all of this is being powered by the magnificence of the sun. It would be better if I had replaced some of the panels that have broken in the winter. But at any rate, so I am deep cycling my battery bank, because on the average, especially hot day, if we're going to run the air conditioning, I don't feel bad, because again, solar powered. But at night we could get down to like a battery capacity of like 55 to 60%. So since I'm on a lead acid battery pack, that is considered a complete cycle, because we went from 100 to nearly 50%. So that's a cycle. And there are only so many of those that your battery will have in it. For the average EV, it's still quite a lot, because 3,000 to 5,000 cycles, it's a lot of cycles. And the rest of your car is probably going to fall apart by the time you hit it.
So we've busted that myth. You were telling me earlier when we were chatting about doing this, that your specifically your Facebook audience seems to have some concerns over EVs. Like what are your
my Facebook? Because I love you all, everybody out there.
We love our listeners. We love our listeners. We love our viewers. Like, what's like the craziest thing you've heard? I know what the craziest thing I've heard is. Like, what's the craziest thing you've heard?
I wouldn't say that it's one statement, because you expect the crazy, you expect the weird wackadoodle. Like, you can't argue with it. Like, I've heard that EVs cause testicular cancer, and you're like, what?
Right.
What are you? Where are you putting them? I don't understand what's happening here. It's the people that seem a little bit rational at the first, and so
Mm-hmm.
then you are trying to engage. So then they're like, "Well, I heard this and I heard that," and it seems like this is a misinformed person, and so you're like, "Well, actually, EV sales are still up in 2023. We sold,
Right.
1.2 million EVs in the U.S. last year. It's on track to be a record year in 2024. Like, understand that." Sales are cyclical. And they're like, well, January was down versus December. And you're like, January's down for everybody. Like almost
Right.
every industry, January's lower than December because Christmas and end of the year
Yes.
sales, etc. And so then you see like, you work your way down there, and then it's what the fires. And then you're like, well, EVs seem to be less fire prone than other vehicles. Obviously, there
Mhm.
is some data here that we are not seeing because we don't have a good index of 20-year
Right.
old
Yeah.
EVs to look at. And when you see
Right.
fire statistics out there, it's the old ICE cars that are catching on fire. But you know what? By and large, EVs don't catch on fire. And they're like, what about the garages collapsing? And you're like, oh, sweet baby Jesus, we're getting down the rabbit hole. Okay, guys,
Yeah.
yes, there are heavy EVs, but a Tesla Model Y is 6 pounds heavier than a BMW X3.
Right.
So not heavier. This is not a problem.
We have a we
Right.
have a
Like,
video going. We have a video going on our site here soon. It's probably already up on this when you guys hear this, but we talked to Volvo about like engineering EVs and stuff with somebody from their safety center. And one of his big takeaways was like, yeah, EVs are heavy, but have you seen how heavy other cars are? Like,
mhm.
yes, we have.
I mean,
And
it's ostensibly a concern. I understand that. I live in a weird
sure.
area, a hilly area where it is pretty normal to have garages above your living space.
Yeah, well, we
So
have. I
like,
mean, there's split levels and stuff here that are
yeah, so
similar.
here we actually almost built a house this way where you drive into your garage and then immediately below the garage is like your living room, and then it's like it could be stair steppy down the hill or literally like on top of each other depending on how steep the hill is. And I remember initially thinking about this, going like, well, gosh, isn't that a structural problem? Like, how do we frame for this with the architect? And the architect was like, it's not a problem. Like the structural loads required for a regular living space, waterbed, party of 30 people in the dining room, etc. That's actually
Right.
about the same as what you'd see in a car. I will say that I don't know if I would really want a Hummer EV above my bed though.
I, probably not. But I don't know for any other
The
reason than
Model
like I
Y, I
don't know.
wouldn't care.
Yeah, but like I don't know. Like if I'm just laying there, I think I'd have a hard time sleeping if I knew there was a Hummer EV right above me. Even if everything was structurally sound, like completely structurally
Yeah,
sound, not a concern at all. Like it's still a
because
Hummer EV,
because
like
OnStar is watching you sleep.
right up there. Yeah, like it's a little scary. Craziest one I've heard is EVs take away from greenhouse gases from CO2, and plants need CO2 to survive. So by switching to EVs, the trees will die.
Wow. Okay.
So I have lots of
So
thoughts. I have lots of thoughts about that. One, trees existed
yeah,
before the automobile.
yeah. I was going to
Um,
say that they've been around a while. I think they will
in
find a way to survive.
as the planet continues to warm with more CO2, plants will start to, you'll see a lot of overgrowth and stuff like that. You'll start to see more of that. But a lot of that doesn't come in trees. It comes in things like poison ivy. Like I saw something recently about like, oh my gosh, poison ivy is going to become worse and worse because that particular type
Hmm, hmm.
of vine grows well with higher concentrations of CO2. Um, Also, I'd like to point out the planet Venus. Um, which its atmosphere is nearly entirely CO2.
That's why
Yeah,
there's so many trees there.
yes, right. Now I know atmospheric pressure is a lot heavier there, so maybe a tree can't grow, but
They're just
you
they're
would,
just shorter. They're shorter and they're
yeah,
red. That's
yeah. Like
yeah,
trees should really thrive there. Like plant life should really thrive on Venus.
yeah.
And guess
It's
what?
really tropical. It's really
There's
toasty.
nothing on Venus. There just isn't. The Russians sent more than one probe there. We have video of a probe landing on Venus,
Hmm,
and it
hmm,
survived
hmm.
all of a couple of all of like a minute. But
Yeah.
um, I get the fire thing a lot. We try to address a lot of that. Yes, when an
Hmm.
EV, I mean, in the interest of full disclosure, when an EV catches on fire, a battery catches on fire, it takes a lot of water to put it out. Like
Oh
there's
yeah,
not a
yeah, yeah.
there isn't an
This is
easy
not a
way.
quick stop.
Yeah, it's not a quick, easy kind of fix the way it maybe
Hmm.
is
Hmm.
on a gasoline powered car. Um,
On the bright
but
side, though, the fires tend to be very slow moving. So, like,
yes,
your battery starts on fire, you got time to get out.
yeah,
And if you don't, you did something wrong.
yeah. And engineers are really working on ways to expel that heat from the pack to help kind of limit thermal
Hmm.
incidents fires to as small or as little of a battery pack as possible instead of the whole pack going up in
Hmm.
flames.
That's one of the
Um,
areas where I would wonder what an Ultium pack, how that performs, because that separation and the cooling and the separate modules, etc. I wonder if that's any better. I don't
yeah,
know. There's still a lot
um,
of energy in there to
yeah,
release.
yeah, and so like it is a concern, and as
Hmm.
cars
Hmm.
just collectively get heavier, that is a concern,
Yep.
especially for pedestrian safety. Just road maintenance and stuff like that. Our infrastructure is not great, not great, Bob. Um, so there are legitimate concerns that just get blown way out of proportion
Hmm.
when it comes to the misinformation out there. The really crazy stuff, like the trees need CO2 thing, like that doesn't bother me so much. I get frustrated with colleagues, I use air
Mm.
quotes, that are like, oh, like they're kind of like gotcha, trying to
Mm.
do it. Like, oh, well, I
Yeah.
thought that this was this way, or oh, look, this is the real solution, and it's like,
Yeah.
you're focusing on one survey, one study, one bit of
Right.
information, or you're looking at something from McKinsey. Like that McKinsey survey drove me absolutely
Yeah, I really want to see the
up a
question.
wall.
I am
Yes.
intrigued. I want to know how the survey was worded, what exactly they asked, and I don't know if they've actually said that. Have they actually shown us the questions? Okay.
I don't I don't believe so.
Yeah.
Um, because I would imagine that that's sort of, I don't want to say proprietary info, but I would imagine they want to
Hmm.
try
I
to
mean, some
to
of it
limit
sounds
exposure to that.
logical, to be honest. Some of it
Sure.
sounds logical. Concerns around charging, etc. It's
Well,
not a lot of clarity on this.
well,
Uh,
and
but
one
the
thing
my
that dealers, well,
Mhm.
sorry, I was just going to say one thing that dealers don't do well, and one thing that automakers don't do well, and one thing that I think that we should do better collectively as a group is help qualify somebody who's interested in an EV.
Mhm. Mhm.
Because when you go in and buy, let's say, that $20 a month Nissan Leaf,
Yeah.
like if you can't charge that at home or at your office, and you're going to a CHAdeMO DC fast charger,
Yeah,
um,
there's that too.
you're not gonna have a good time, right?
Right, right.
So if
But
you,
I am curious to see who's getting these cheap lease deals in a way, because all the studies that I have seen, which are, mind you, limited,
Mhm,
indicate that new car buyers, and this is where I have a tiny bit less pity sometimes for new EV buyers that are somehow surprised.
yeah,
But it's new car buyers of all descriptions, by and large, skew upper
tend
income
to have a home.
earning, suburban dwelling, not elderly, because I'm almost in that age range. Let me be careful with what I'm saying here. But like, in the bell curve peaks in the 50s and 60s, years old, but
Yep.
solidly suburban, solidly upper income earning, etc. Family home owning, not townhomes, not condos, not apartments. These are people that could charge at home. There
Yep.
is this myth of the lower income person that lives in an apartment in downtown Manhattan, whatever, that
Right.
somehow
Well,
magically
maybe not
has a
Manhattan.
place to put a car. And then they
Right.
can't charge in at the 50th floor of their apartment building. And like, that person's not buying a car. They're not buying a car at all, but
No.
they're not buying an EV. I am
So
actually genuinely concerned about used EVs and where those people are going to charge.
yeah. So anecdotally, first off, used EVs, yes, I think that's a legit concern there. Anecdotally, we often complain about seeing bolt EVs sitting at 350 kilowatt chargers on 50 kilowatts,
Yeah.
55 peak. I have seen a decent number of people, just again, sample size of me just spending time at chargers. Typically, that Bolt driver seems to be younger, especially the ones that are sitting going all the way to
Hmm.
100%. seem to be just a little bit younger. Now that doesn't. It could just be a Detroit area thing. It could be, whatever. Like, I'm not saying that people are going out there and being swindled into these EVs, not knowing what they're doing. I do tend to agree with you that new car buyers typically are better suited for having a place to charge. But
I will defend not defend the Bolt owner specifically, because I don't know what their life is like. I'm going to sound like
sure.
a uber liberal here.
Well,
I don't know
no.
what their story is.
Right.
Maybe everything else was occupied and they pulled into the 350 and then everybody else
Yeah,
drives
no,
away
it's
and
not.
then they're going like, hey.
Yeah,
But on that front, you will not get 150 kilowatts in a Bolt or an Equinox, an Equinox or a Blazer if you're not at a 350 kilowatt EA station. You can't do 150 kilowatts at the 150 kilowatt outlet.
okay, then.
Voltage is too low.
Oh, okay.
So
Yikes.
there are considerations. So sometimes you might go
Sure.
like, well, what's that
Oh,
a-hole
well,
doing over there?
My point isn't so much my
reasons.
complaint of that, more so than like education. Did that person not know they could pull into this other one? Like there's an etiquette.
They might not.
Not that you should have to worry about etiquette, but like there's some etiquette questions that maybe we could do better at communicating. There should just be more plugs. There should just be more chargers, and not have that problem. I don't really want to victim blame, but when I see bolts charging past, let's say 80 or 90%, especially the folks sitting there to 100, I have noticed some that are a bit younger. So I don't know if they just got a really good deal on it and we're like, oh, hey, I'm interested in EVs, so let me do it. I can't imagine it's half of all new EV buyers, though. I can't imagine it half.
Posit a possible explanation. If it is a younger buyer and the younger buyer is not a homeowner, because that's just because the bell curve peaks at 50 to 60 high income earning, etc., there is still a trail on the bell curve, right? So if this 25 to 30 something person that lives in a condo has to DC charge their vehicle because that's the only way they can charge it, they may be doing two things. I would say they may be charging all the way to 100%, so that way they don't have to go back later in the week and DC charge. They may be like, I just want to get it full. Or they may be road tripping where they actually need as much range as they could get to go where they want to go.
Yeah. I mean, that is always a possibility. Some of the chargers we go to are not along major thoroughfares. They're in parking lots for malls and stuff like that. But EA likes to put their stuff in really not so great places. So
yeah, I mean, three-phase power is where three-phase power is. I do hear that a lot, and I hear a lot of people saying, "Well, I wish they had more three-phase powers here or there." And you're like, "Yeah, they're never." DC fast chargers here or there, and they're like, "Yeah, they're never going to be there because we don't have three-phase power there." Rural America, for instance, by and large, does not have three-phase power. There are farms and large ranches that may have three-phase power available here and there, but generally speaking, when you look at the Department of Energy numbers, the vast majority, physically, geographically in the U.S., three-phase power is not available. Like, it's just not available for me where I am. So there's just no way to offer a DC fast charge station.
Well, fortunately, you really only need a DC fast charge if you're doing it right. You only need to really DC fast charge on road trips. Because you probably should be charging at home or at the office where, level 2 is 80% of EV drivers charge at home on a level 2 or home or work.
I'm actually a big proponent of workplace charging, and I think this is an area where we haven't really seen as much dedication and interest in a way, because when this is going to be somewhat controversial. I know it's lovely for the EV owner to be like, we charge at night where it's cheap or whatever. Yeah, but that's the worst time to charge, because most likely the renewables, the share of renewable energy on the grid at that point in time is the lowest it will ever be during a 24-hour cycle. So realistically, the ideal time to charge your EV is actually the early working hours of the day. So you get to work, that's when you should start charging, and you should be done by like noon, when the demand for air conditioning starts to rise again, because that's when there's a lot of really good renewable energy available on the grid. But most people are at work, and a lot of employers seem to have little to no interest in workplace charging.
Well, I feel like if you wanted to get people to come to the office, it could, I mean, maybe not be the only incentive, but it could be part of a back to office sort of strategy. And I think that, yeah, you're right, because a lot of renewables come from solar, so you don't want to, you're obviously not getting solar at night. Texas, in their big wind farms in the west end of the state,
They
is,
definitely produce a lot of wind, yeah.
yeah, they're very wind heavy. So, like, that's how Tesla can offer like $30 a month unlimited level 2 charging through the power company if you do it off peak, because they got to keep a load on that grid. But yeah, early morning, not early
But
morning, but like when you get
even in Texas, there is so much solar available in Texas
yeah,
and in California that there's a huge amount curtailed every day because there's so much available that cannot possibly be used, and there's nowhere to put the power.
yeah,
So even though we have some of the largest stationary battery banks in California currently, and they're building a whole nother group of them in Southern California, there's just no place to stick as much solar energy as we're actually producing now. But you know what? If you could stuff it into your battery in your EV, that would be fantastic. And that's kind of
and
one
then
of those
maybe
other
pull it
things.
out.
It's like, yeah, it's like one of those other things. It's like the sky's falling because, like, oh, well, EV demand is going to cause the grid to collapse because of whatever. You're like,
Right.
according to PG&E,
Yeah.
California uses less power now than we did in the 1980s. So,
And when you can send power back to the grid
yeah.
from said car, like I asked somebody recently and they had no idea what I was talking about, but like this idea of arbitrage, like you charge your car, charge your car overnight, run the house during the day run your house off the car or whatever. The idea of being able to send power back not only to your house but to the grid, I think solves a huge number of grid issues.
I am selfish. I don't want my car powering the grid. When
Even if
is
they pay you?
when is the grid going to compensate me for the wear and tear on my battery pack? That's what I want to know.
Well, as long as you're not cycling it, you're fine.
But there's still some degradation in my battery when they want to pull something out. And
They're pulling like
currently,
1 kilowatt hour out. It's like they're
currently most
not.
of the plans are not involving compensation. I'm like, if PG&E is a publicly traded for-profit company,
Oh,
why do I want to help them out?
they need to pay you. They do need to pay you. Like you ain't
Yeah,
getting my electricity back if you ain't paying me.
and
But
I want a huge premium for this electricity. This is premier electricity in my battery.
yes, premium V power maximum. If they want,
I want to bid for it. I want to be like, we need a kilowatt hour. My bid is $5. I'll be like, okay, let's talk now.
yeah, that's actually not a terrible idea.
How bad you want it?
If people want to hear more of these wonderful late stage capitalistic ideas, where can they find you, Alex, and your team?
They can find us at the Auto Buyer's Guide and EV Buyer's Guide channels on YouTube and the podcasts and the Facebooks. And these are topics we generally try and avoid because people get very upset for some reason. So
well, then you'll have to come back on here, and they can get upset
yeah.
with me here because hey, engagement.
Yeah.
So this basically concludes an episode of the EV Pulse, the Resistance podcast. If you want to learn more about the podcast, get show notes if you're not watching this on YouTube. You can go to resistance.evpulse.com. General information is, of course, at evpulse.com. And if you want to help support the show, the best thing you can do at this point, tell people to subscribe. But if you want to help beyond that, then give us your money. Patreon.com/EVPulse or become a channel member on the EV Pulse YouTube channel. You can get early access to these episodes and our other videos. There's a bootleg feed where you can get our pre and post show stuff that you can only get there, plus some other goodies. So consider
that
all of that.
All access thing have you worked that out?
Access. Yeah, we're trying to figure out the
for
logistics.
Chad's OnlyFans. So,
OnlyFans.com/Alex on autos.
No, that'd be the resistance one where you guys are just checking your pulse. Like, is your pulse is it thready? Is it...
All right.
Oh,
See y'all.
wow.
See y'all